Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Management Board meeting of February 4th, 2026. Emphasis on the Black Sea Bass. My name is John Maniscalco. I'm an administrative proxy for New York. I am joined by Commission FMP Coordinator Tracy Bauer and Chelsea Toohey, as well as Tony Kearns. And of course, I appreciate everyone's assistance in making this meeting as smooth and effective as possible. We also have joining us Technical Committee Chair Rachel Sizak, also from New York, to present to the board. Tony, did you want to go over who was online?
Why, yes, I do. All right, let's see if I don't mess this one up. We have Emerson Hasbrook from New York. And Joe Gresco from Connecticut. And I think that's it. No, Brian Turner from North Carolina.
All right, thank you, Tony. So there's a draft agenda before us. The fifth item on the agenda, elect a vice chair, is going to be put off likely to May as we are still in discussions. Are there any other additions or modifications that board members would like to make to today's draft agenda? Not seeing any hands, we will consider the agenda as modified, approved by the board by consent. And so we can move on to the draft record of the board's proceedings from February 14th of 2024. That needs to be approved today. Are there any modifications to those draft proceedings? Okay, not seeing any hands again, we'll consider those approved by the board consent as well. So up next is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda today. At this time, if there are any public comments from people either in person or online that would like to comment on items not on the agenda, this is your opportunity and you can show your interest by raising your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So then that means we're proceeding to our main event today, which is to consider the regional distribution of Black Sea Bass liberalization for 2026 to 2027 recreational management measures. Starting with the technical committee report from the TC chair, Rachel Sizak. At this time, I'm going to excuse myself so I can represent the state of New York, and Bob Beal has agreed to take over as chair and run the remainder of the meeting. Thank you, Bob.
Great, thanks, John, glad to do it. And with that, I think we'll jump right into agenda item number 4, which is the considering regional distribution of Black Sea Bass. And I guess, Rachel, if you're ready to go, or is you're okay. Tracy Bauer is going to start off first, then we'll go to Rachel. So there you go. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you. So I'm going to start off today. Next slide, please. Going over a little bit of background and addendum 32 before we move into the technical committee report itself. So really brief background, the board approved a 20% liberalization for Black Sea Bass for 2026 through 2027 at their most recent December 2025 joint meeting between the council and the board. And since that meeting, the technical committee has met 3 times to discuss considerations and recommendations to provide to the board. The overall purpose of today's meeting is to determine the regional distribution of this 20% liberalization. Next slide. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is referenced or goes back to addendum 32. In this addendum, it establishes a 3-region framework with a northern region that's Massachusetts through New York, New Jersey on its own as a region, and then the southern region, which is Delaware through North Carolina, only north of Cape Hatteras. And in this addendum, generally it provides a direction to the board on developing measures to meet that coastwide target in a manner that aims to reduce intra-regional and inter-regional disparities where possible. And it does not give any directional allocations of these regions, but directs the board again to consider how to reduce inter and intra disparities. And it actually specifically states in the addendum that measures put into place in previous years are not allocations, nor do they necessarily set a precedent for setting future allocations. Next slide. So here on the screen, this is also later in the presentation that we can refer to if needed. are the current Black Sea, or I guess last year's Black Sea bass regulations, color-coded by region, with red being the northern region, New Jersey, and then the southern region. So this is currently the measures for Black Sea bass that are in place. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Rachel to continue with the technical committee report.
Thanks, Tracy. Good afternoon. Next slide, please. So the technical committee did not reach consensus and instead recommended the following 3 approaches to distribute the 20% liberalization. So the first option is the liberalization is distributed equally between regions. For example, each region will work separately to achieve but not exceed 20% liberalization. Option B would be the board assigns a percent liberalization to a region or regions, and the other regions' percent liberalizations are adjusted accordingly to achieve the 20% coast-wide liberalization. And then option C would be that the board assigns 1 or more management measures to a region or regions, resulting in a de facto percent liberalization, and the other regions' percent liberalizations are adjusted accordingly to achieve the 20% coast-wide liberalization. Next slide. So important considerations as we move through this presentation is that the percent liberalizations are not directly comparable among the regions because regional harvest scales differ. So this means that a given percent change in one region does not translate to the same percent change elsewhere. So for options B or C, the board should evaluate how assigning changes to a focal region affects the other regions and the coast-wide outcome before making their decision. Next slide. So for status quo and harvest targets, the median coast-wide 2026 harvest that was estimated by the recreational demand model, if management measures are held status quo, is 5,860,833 pounds. Coast-wide harvest liberalized by 20%, calculated using the median coast-wide value, is 7,033,000 pounds. And this would be an approximate increase of 1,172,167 pounds. So it's important when looking at this table here that has the status quo median harvest by state, that the management board understands that all of these coast-wide values are calculated off of the median values across the 100 draws of the recreational demand model, which is different to prior years where we calculated that in a slightly different manner. Next slide. So since we're using those median calculations, example management measures are kind of the best way going forward to kind of understand how some of these percentages would be distributed. So just as some examples for the northern region, they explored the percent liberalizations and median harvest in pounds of black sea bass by state, resulting in a region-wide minimum size limit of 16 inches and a region-wide minimum size limit of 15.5 inches, as estimated by the recreational demand model. And it also included an increased season for Connecticut for the private and shore modes, and that's 5/18 through 11/28. And you can see that coast-wide, the percent liberalization for the 16 inches would be 13.9%, and the coast-wide liberalization, sorry, not coast-wide, region-specific. That's a typo on this slide. So that bottom line should be region-wide percent liberalization, not coast-wide. So it's 13.9% for the 16 inches and 29.1% for the 15.5 inches. For the southern region, they explored the percent liberalizations for black sea bass by state, resulting from a region-wide minimum size limit of 12.5 inches and a season from May 1st through December 31st, and a region-wide minimum size limit of 12.5 inches and a season from April 19th through December 31st, again estimated by the recreational demand model. and adjusted by proposed methodology. And again, this slide also has a typo. That bottom line should be region-wide, not coast-wide. So for the 12.5 inches with that May 1st start, that would be a region-wide liberalization of 16.5%. And for a region-wide 12.5 inch size with an April 19th start, that would be a region-wide liberalization of 19.9%. Next slide. So to further help the board with this decision, we assembled the following analyses and metrics by state to assist. And what we looked at were angler satisfaction metrics, discard ratios, coastal distribution, catch per trip data, and coast-wide harvest trends. Next slide. So for angler satisfaction, what we're measuring is actually the compensating variation, which is a sort of textbook metric that is used in economic analyses. And this metric is integrated with the angler choice data that the recreational demand model already integrates and uses with its outputs. And what it's measuring is angler satisfaction due to regulations, the changes in availability of fish in the system, and is based on changes in expected trip level harvest and discards of all 3 species. And just as a sort of tangible example, if fish are less available, compensating variation is how much money someone could be paid to offset their loss. And if fish are more available, compensating variation is how much money could be taken away while leaving them no worse off. So it is essentially measuring angler welfare impact of a change, not just how their spending is changing. So if fish are no more or less available and management measures don't change, then the compensating variation or angler satisfaction would just be 0. Next slide. So as mentioned, the data for this calculation is collected through the Marine Recreational Information Program's socioeconomic assessment and integrated with NIMF's 2022 Angler Choice Experiment Survey. And an example of which is on this slide, which I know is a little difficult for folks to see, but essentially it is giving trip options and outcomes, each with an associated cost. And anglers were asked to pick which of these trips you would take, with one option being they would not take the trip at all, or they would have selected one of the other trip options. And some of the way that that kind of pans out is sometimes they're presented with, okay, you would have caught 20 black sea bass and only been able to keep 1, or you would have thrown back no black sea bass but got to keep 2. So just there's all different kind of metrics and assimilations that were presented to anglers. And this is the data that is integrated already into the recreational demand model. And that is how it is generating outputs. So this is a metric that's kind of already integrated. It's just pulling out the economic specific data for this. Next slide. So this on the screen is status quo angler satisfaction by state. So if measures don't change, but we know that there will be changes in availability of those fish based on the last assessment, this is a measure of those satisfaction, angler welfare values. And as you can see in the northern region, you have negative values, which essentially says that you would have to pay those anglers to make up for the loss. And the positive values that you see for New Jersey South are demonstrating that you could take money away from those anglers and they would still be just as well off on those trips, with New Jersey having the highest metrics. Next. We also looked at discard ratios. So the following figures provide information on black sea bass discards relative to overall catch by state and region. as calculated by the recreational demand model for the 2026 under status quo measures. The orange you can see is total released, with the blue being total kept, and the black line at the top is just the total catch. Next, yep. So if you look at these percentages of the discard ratios by state, you have New York, Rhode Island, Virginia, and Connecticut having the highest black sea bass discard rates, while Delaware, Maryland, and New Jersey have the lowest discard rates. And if you look at that same data by just region, the northern region has the highest overall percentage of discards at 89%, followed by the southern region and New Jersey at 70%. Next slide. We also looked at coastal distribution. The charts that you see there on the left are taken directly from the 2025 Black Sea Bass Assessment. And you can see that trends in Black Sea Bass abundance in the North and South stock assessment, with a split at New Jersey being approximately at the Hudson Canyon. The North subunit abundance has been increasing steadily since mid-2000s, and is at a time series high, with the South subunit abundance varying without overall trend, but in the past 5 to 10 years has had an increase in abundance. We also felt it would be helpful for folks to see the coastal harvest trends. And as you can see here, the green line is the northern region, the blue, dark blue line is New Jersey, and then the orange line is Delaware through North Carolina. Next slide. When looking at the catch per trip information, the average, this is the average catch per trip that is currently input in the recreational demand model. And paired with that information is the average catch per trip, average directed trips for those states as well. The range is from 1.59 in New York to 3.69 in North Carolina. And you can kind of see when you look at that metric, paired with the number of directed trips, you can kind of see how that value works out. Next slide. We also considered some additional methodology, and this is for the southern region to estimate harvest in MRIP waves that were not previously open to Black Sea Bass recreational harvest. The need was that the recreational demand model would underestimate, the reason we needed this was the recreational demand model would underestimate harvest during that unopened period, and we wanted to be more conservative about opening up harvest into that time. So the methodology that we worked out was to calculate the expected increase in harvest when changing from May 15th to May 1st, and then divide by 14 to arrive at a daily rate. And then we use that daily harvest rate to estimate an increase in harvest if expanding season into April by an additional number of days. And the TC had no objections to this methodology for expanding into April. Next slide. Oh. So North Carolina harvest estimated by the recreational demand model. This year it was estimating Black Sea Bass harvest for all of North Carolina, not just north of Cape Hatteras, which is the current stock boundary. So the RDM may be overestimating harvest by up to 4% in the last 5 years. So the recommendation by the TC was to continue to include harvest as is from the RDM, to be risk adverse and use that as a buffer. And this issue is going to be resolved in all future iterations of the recreational demand model. So it won't include, going forward, harvest south of Cape Hatteras. And with that, that is the full TC presentation. So I'll turn it back to Tracy.
Thanks, Rachel. One last thing that the TC did discuss yesterday, or not yesterday, but at their last meeting, was the proposed timeline and workflow and how all of this would work together with all the deadlines. So this is the timeline that the TC agreed would be doable with all the different proposals they need to put in, and with the functionality of the RDM and the decision support tool as it is right now. And some of these dates in here do differ from what's included at the end of the memo in the meeting materials. So between February 5th and February 18th, states would work within their region to produce regional options. Obviously, they can talk with other regions depending on what you guys are deciding today. Then close of business February 18th, all regional options under consideration would have to be posted to a shared Google Drive, making all of those, like this would be like basically the raw runs from the RDM available to the Northeast Fisheries Science Center scientists, who would be able to take all of these different options, on and around February 19th, and look at all the different ways that we can combine them, and it could basically weed out all of the options coast-wide that do not equal to or are above the 20% liberalization threshold. So basically can narrow down all the different combinations that are submitted by the states to make sure that they are at that 20% or below. Following that information being received back from the Northeast Fisheries Science Center staff, the TC will be able to look at the results, and between February 19th and February 26th, they'll be able to finalize the 5 options to be included in their proposals. And that was something that the TC had discussed and concluded would make the most sense, of each region submitting 5 options. And that way we're limiting the number of possible combinations that we would need to run through R to determine, which of these combinations of all of these options from all of these states are at or below the 20%. So February 26th, once they have all the proposals, I will put together the memo and send that out to the board with all of these options under consideration. And then our board meeting is March 5th, where the proposals will be approved. So next slide. That brings us to the decision points for today. Firstly, the distribution of the 20% recreational black sea bass liberalization, and then sort of a following question, or just to make sure that the board doesn't have any major concerns or objections to the additional proposed methodology or the TC recommendations regarding the workflow and North Carolina harvest. So with that, we can take any questions.
Great, thanks. So let's start with questions, then we'll go to the decision point on the 20% liberalization. So I've got John Clark and then Nicola for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tracy and Rachel, for the presentations. I'm just still trying to figure out this angler satisfaction by state. If you could go to that graph, because this is based on what this is telling me is that, like, for example, in the North region, if you just kept the same regulations they had these past 2 years, they're not going to be very happy. But in the New Jersey, they're ecstatic about that. Seems kind of odd when you go down to the recreational catch per trip. It doesn't seem like there's that much difference between the states. I mean, New York is catching a lot of fish, but it looked like, where is that dissatisfaction coming from in the North region, as they had some of the, I mean, the catch per trip includes discards?
Yes.
Okay, so like I said, I'm just curious because some of those catch per trip rates are higher in the North region than in some of the southern states, and yet they seem particularly grumpy. What's the situation? I mean, I'm just kind of curious about that.
Sure. So I think 2 things. One, this is a economic calculation based on the trip preferences that were indicated in that angler choice survey. So it's predicting which trips would be taken and wouldn't be taken based on what we've kind of already seen with abundance. There's a growing abundance in, the Hudson Canyon North, and also increasing abundance for the southern region, at least for the past 5 years. So given that kind of increased availability, I know, again, it was hard to see kind of in that spreadsheet of what they were choosing between, but I don't want to get too into like predicting what those anglers were thinking, but if somebody doesn't want to take a trip where they caught 20 but only got to keep one, but is comfortable taking a trip where they caught one if they didn't really have to throw any back, that has a different like value associated with it. And, based on discard ratios, the catch per trip is not a reflection of overall discards. So you would have somebody not throwing back as many fish could be more satisfied or more willing to take that trip. So that, I think that's one part of what's playing into that there. There's also, there isn't universal satisfaction in New Jersey. The for hire fleet is that tiny orange bar in there. So while it seems like the private mode is kind of driving the ship for that very high value, you have the shore mode and the for hire mode that do appear to be less satisfied with what's going on, which I think does play into that whole scenario as well.
Right. I'm just saying, when I hear about that, I don't think we can put much weight on this. And, even for New York and Massachusetts, for some reason, their shore anglers are happy enough with what they're catching, but everybody else is not very happy. Okay, thanks.
Nicola.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I ask my question, I would suggest in response to John that you just need to look at those release rates per region, and that's got a lot to do with the angler satisfaction, I think, in terms of availability of fish sizes and the proportion of fish that are being released in order to catch a keeper in the north.
I agree, Nicola,
Yeah.
but all regions had very high discard rates. Even Delaware, I think we were the best, but we still had more than 50% discards.
Yeah, I think we can agree they're too high everywhere, but not equally as high. But I wanted to ask kind of about the workflow that was proposed by the technical committee. The 5 options per region, did the technical committee kind of consider how many states are in a region and the disparity of the measures within the region when making that kind of blanket request of just 5 options? I think it's, essentially New Jersey as a state-only region can bring forward 5 options, but 4 states with very disparate regulations have to agree to the same number. So I guess if it's a question or just a request for maybe a little bit of leniency if we need it in the north, because it doesn't seem like a very fair conclusion based on the makeup of the regions.
Yeah, I think the main consideration that the TC was thinking when they put forward that 5 is just the number of resulting combinations that they're going to have to deal with after, it's run through the R code that the Northeast Fisheries Science Center has put together, where I think when I forget what the numbers, if it was like 10 options, it would be 1 point something million different combinations to consider. And we were trying to keep that low. But again, it's the TC members that will be needing to filter through those. So I guess what they think is doable within the northern region of consideration.
Yeah, and for 2 options per state, it was 512 options that we would need to look through and run through the model. So even at 2 per state, it was rough.
Okay, Emerson online, and I'll go to Joe Semino at the table. Emerson?
Thank you, but my question was also included in the discussion that we had a few minutes ago. So my question's been answered. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Emerson. Joe?
Yeah, just a follow-up to Nicola's question. I tried to listen into the TC meeting while I was driving down here. And so that math of iterations was assuming that each southern region would put forward individual 5 options instead of the fact that the southern region has been moving in lockstep and I'm assuming would stay in lockstep. And so it's 5 regions for 4 states. So I think the math got a little bit strange there, and there was no acknowledgement of the fact that the southern region has been, you know, putting forward their options as a region, not, you know, separate measures.
Other questions? Chris Batsevich.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, thank you for the presentation. Rachel, during the technical committee, was there any discussion about the option for the southern states where it drops the minimum size limit down to 12.5 inches of the potential impact of having harvest higher than expected? Because I think I remember from the stock assessment that there's a couple pretty good year classes entering the fishery now that I guess would still be below the minimum size limit for the recreational fishery in the north, but would be more in probably entering the fishery in the southern region with the smaller size limit. So I don't know if there's any discussion from the TC about possibly having a higher than expected catch, even though the RDM does factor in future abundance. There's still a lot of uncertainty. Thanks.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that one more time? Because I just want to make sure I'm answering. We did look at the release rate so outside of our meeting, we were looking at the reductions in discards based on some of these, 12, we did look at 12.5 inches, what that would reduce discard ratios by. It was not a huge amount, even if you dropped down just that 1/2 inch, there was a change of about a range of 1% to 4%, depending on the state and the southern region, with that change in the rate of discards, and that's based on those that increase in abundance that the RDM is predicting.
All set, Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I was kind of thinking along the other line, instead of dropping, cutting down the number of discards, it would increase harvest, of course, but could it increase harvest more than we expect, just with maybe a higher availability of fish entering that 12.5 inch size limit, with which I think are some better year classes in the population that are at that size. And again, that's based on trying to remember from reading the stock assessment results from last year. Thanks.
Yeah, we didn't really look at it from that specific angle. Sorry.
Mike, you have your hand up, and then I'll go to John Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tracy, in your presentation, you mentioned in the addendum, as part of the addendum, there's a reference to the intra and inter regional disparities between measures. I think that was in part of your presentation. Can you remind me what the provisions in the addendum are that provide guidance as to how the regions would conduct, how they would find some ways to mitigate the disparity? Is there any specific guidance that says if you're working in this manner, you should maybe use this as a guide, as one way would be to, everybody would reduce the size limit all together, so that overall the region is hopefully reducing dead discards or discards. Is there any guidance in there? I don't have it in front of me and can't remember all the details.
Yeah, I'd have to double check the exact language, but it does not provide any specifics like that. It is more general in its guidance of in general, reducing disparities and yeah, unfortunately, it does not go into specifics.
Yeah, John?
Yes, thank you for letting me ask another question. You only had 2 scenarios for the North region, And you can't help noticing that one state in the North region benefits much more than the other 3 states. And I was just curious as to whether the North region, whatever the liberalization would be coming up with, kind of following up on what Mike said, more separate regulations per state than the region has already kind of drifted to.
Nicola, do you have a response for that, or while we're looking at each other at the front of the room?
I think I do, and I think there's maybe a little bit of a misconception as to what is presented in the TC memo. I got the sense listening to those calls that what you see in table 3 for the South were some options that the South was actually interested in, whereas what's presented here for the Northern region was just an example of what changing the minimum size does. I would not consider either of the tables, of the what's in table 2 for the North a preferred option among us. We have different priorities. I think reducing the minimum size would be a common goal, but speaking for Massachusetts, the greatest disparity in our regulations is our season length. So that would really be our priority. But I think it serves as an example of the type of increase that the North would need to be able to meet some common goals that would achieve a reduction in releases and improve angler satisfaction. But please don't consider these to be an option that we want to be prescribed to the North at this meeting.
So within your region then, Nicola, you would think that your 4 states would all try to get to an equal amount, or an equal, not an exact equal, but a fairly equal percent liberalization.
I think we would then refer to the language in addendum 32 that says within a region, we should be working on reducing the interregional disparities. So that would not mean an equal percent per state, but that would be subject to kind of the next round of negotiations within the region once we know what we're working with. That's my take. So.
All right, other questions before we get into the reduction allocation? Seeing none, can you put up the last slide with the 3 options? Yeah, there you go. So this is where we are. Are there any comments on this? Does anyone have any motions to get the conversation started? I saw Adam's hand go up first, then Nicholas.
Thank you very much. We've worked very hard as a board and as a commission over the better part of the last decade to work towards doing something better for the management of black sea bass, and most of that work has gone on collectively. Now, after almost a decade and a half, we get a liberalization for black sea bass. Yay. Only not yay. Here we are at each other's throats, begging, clawing, pulling for every last fish, presenting options that show one state may liberalize by up to 57%, while another only liberalizes by 11%. Yes, addendum 32 sets out certain parameters in 3.2.1 about how we should try to strive towards reducing the intra-regional disparities, but we can't lose sight of the message that we send to the constituents when we leave here today, that better management suddenly creates a windfall for certain people and something that resembles almost nothing for other states. I just think that undoes all the work that we've done for the better part of the last decade as I sit here today. I do have some thoughts about ways that we could achieve a more collaborative approach, but I'm going to start this out by making a motion that follows the first of the 3 possible approaches from the TC by I move that all states move towards crafting measures for achieving maximum 20% liberalization in each region. Not that one. I'm holding on to that one. Don't have that one? Okay. Then, you know what? I'll jump straight to it. Go ahead, put up the one that I put there then. I'll jump straight to that. I will say that I'm going to forego any posturing or anything here, and I'm going to go straight to a collaborative approach where the coast works together with a goal of achieving a 20% reduction. And my motion is, I move to allow the northern region to exceed a 20% liberalization by adding unused liberalizations from the New Jersey and southern regions, with the combined regional liberalizations not exceeding a coast-wide 20% liberalization. The New Jersey and southern regions shall not exceed 20% liberalizations and shall collaborate with the northern region following the standards and guidelines set forth in Addendum 32, Section 3.2.1, Paragraph 2, when developing proposed measures to be brought forth for the board approval in March. I'll make that motion, and if I can get a second, I'll touch on some of the other scheduling concerns and other items here. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Is there a second? John Clark. And so go ahead, Adam, with justification.
Okay, thanks very much. And yeah, thank you for putting this up first. Yeah, we're past the time. I don't want to play games here, right? I started out first off, well, we'll make a motion. No, let's get right to the crux of it. I know there's going to be another motion that's made. But again, at the end of the day, we've come so far. We heard comments earlier today in the LGA session in particular about concerns about MRIP. We've worked as a management body to mitigate a number of those concerns, a much more holistic management process. And then when I start seeing the model runs and the suggestions, and I understand the pain, and I understand that there's an eye on New Jersey here that says, oh, wow, look, they've got a 12.5-inch size limit. Well, we got there by choice. We went to a one-fish bag limit in New Jersey during our time of highest effort that has destroyed that effort. Nobody in New Jersey targets black sea bass during the period of highest effort in the summer with a one-fish bag limit. So for all those that claim, apparently including the RDM with their satisfaction output model, that New Jersey is the utopia of status quo black sea bass measures, no, sorry, long way from it. I understand that there are a timeline that we have to work with here. I understand that this proposal would introduce questions. Well, just how much is the South going to take? Just how much is New Jersey going to take? We've worked together collaboratively. The TC can work together collaboratively. I am confident that we could put some aspirational goals here to say New Jersey and the southern regions are going to bring forward some proposals in advance of that February 18th deadline that we saw up here, to give the northern states some time to take advantage of some options. You may not see me sitting here at the next board meeting after I say this and my constituents at home say we want this guy gone, but I'll go ahead and say it, that I will advocate back at home to say, if we can give up 2 days somewhere so that somebody else can get a little bit from the shared pain we've all had from black sea bass mismanagement, well, then maybe we should really consider that. So call me aspirational, call me glasses half full. I'm not going to sit here and make a jelly roll, Jesus is great comment here. But I just want us to do better than to sit here and after a decade and a half of mismanagement, suddenly say it's everybody in it for themselves, every region in it for themselves. I pray that we can do better here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. John, a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's always hard to follow up Adam, especially when he talked about that decade and a half of mismanagement. That coincides with the amount of time I've been on the board. So thanks, Adam. But I just wanted to say that I agree with Adam that I think the southern region would be agreeable to the option in the plan that would give us, I think it took us to 16.5% liberalization, but I don't like to preempt the angling public. I would like to run it past them first. And I know that, just speaking for Delaware alone, that I have been approached by some of our for hire sector that have asked for the April 15th start date. And as the table showed, we could get fairly close to that without exceeding the 20%. So, once again, I don't want to, it's not that I would say we're locked in, but I wouldn't want to preempt the public from having a chance to weigh in before we decided on the options. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, John. I'm going to go to Tony with one timing issue.
And Adam and I talked about this prior to crafting his motion, and I think it's important for the discussion portion of it. That's why I wanted to get this in. So earlier, I think Tracy and Rachel went over some dates of when items are due. And I think that what Adam and I talked about is that the northern states would need to know what percent liberalization would be left on the table for them to work up measures so that staff can then run those measures to make sure that we're not exceeding the 20% coast-wide harvest. And so what we came up with, and I don't know if this works for TC members or states, so that's what I think is important to hear about, is that the New Jersey and the southern region would have to turn in their proposals by close of business on February 12th instead of close of business on February 18th. That gives the northern states 4 or 5 days to work up additional proposals for whatever is left on the table from New Jersey and the southern states if they leave anything on the table through this. So I just want to put that out there so in your discussion you can talk about that.
Great. Thanks, Tony. All right. Comments on the motion that are on the board? Discussion. In favor or in opposition? Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to address some of the comments that I've been hearing tonight. First is the large liberalization that New York would require to get to 15.5. That's just indicative of just how poor the fishery is in New York, and just combine that with a 93% discard rate. And New Jersey didn't make a choice to stay at 12.5. For New York to have equivalent measures, that's 180% liberalization for New York's measures to match what New Jersey has today. This isn't equal but different. This is less and different. I also this challenging of the model. This economic model, it's something new for us, but it's not new across the globe. It's a well-established model, and the new paradigm is to see a result and not like it and challenge it baselessly. Those results show that there is a large disparity in angler satisfaction up and down the coast, and it's negative in the north and it's more positive in New Jersey and south. And you don't really need to look very far to look at our measures to see what's driving those kinds of issues. I also want to note that in 2010, when this 15 years of black sea bass recreational management started, when we went from coastwide to state by state, New Jersey's harvest was matched separately by the harvest in both New York and by Massachusetts. Today, that harvest is greater than the entirety of all 4 northern states. Things have changed. It hasn't been fair. Northern anglers have been suffering for the last 15 years. With that, I'd like to substitute a motion, please.
Go ahead when you're ready with the substitute.
Staff should have it. Move to approve a 30% liberalization for the northern region, Massachusetts.
Hang on one second, John.
Thank you. Move to substitute to approve a 30% liberalization for the northern region, Massachusetts through New York, with the remainder of the coastwide liberalization to be split proportionately between New Jersey and the southern region, Delaware through North Carolina, as to allow equal liberalizations for both. And if I can get a second, I'd provide additional justification.
I saw Dr. McNamee's hand come up first over in this corner. So go ahead, John, with the justification.
Thank you. 30% is approximately what the region needs for a minimum length of 15.5 inches and to open a candidate's close season in the early summer. The remaining liberalizations for New Jersey and South, approximately 12 to 13% for each, will allow moderate change in both regions for a coastwide liberalization of approximately 20%. The North does not wish to prescribe 15.5 inches, as some member states may have other priorities. Either way, liberalizations of measures in the northern region will bring greater consistency, reduce discards, and improve angler satisfaction metrics, which are the lowest on the coast. Angler satisfaction in the north is consistently poor compared to the positive metrics in the southern region and the highly positive metrics in New Jersey. We've already kind of discussed that at length. Vast indices, these are the relative indices of abundance produced by the assessment, show moderate increases since 2010 in the south, but an increase between 5 to 10 times in the north. Over that time, regulations in the north have become draconian, while current southern regions are not that different from what they were in 2010, before state-by-state measures were implemented. At that time, there was 12.5 inches, 25 fish, open May 22nd to 10/11, and 11/1 to 12/31. A moderate liberalization in 2026 could see regs that are essentially equivalent. Moderate liberalizations in New Jersey in 2026 could open closed periods at low bag limits, augmenting what is already the largest fishery on the coast with the higher satisfaction metric. The proportions of fish aid provided by the assessment and used to inform the RDM predict very low availability of legal fish to northern anglers at 16.5 inches. New Jersey and southern region anglers are taking fish 3 years and older. The New York northern anglers are forced to fish on ages 6 years and older. A 15.5 inch minimum size in the northern region amongst at least some of those states would help decrease the discard rates and allow for more successful trips. While a 30% liberalization in the north may sound like a large sacrifice to commissioners and anglers of other states, our seasons are still shorter, our sizes are still larger, and our bag limits are still lower. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Jason, do you have any additional comments on this motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't say too much. John did a nice job with the justification, kind of laying out all of the data that we have in front of us. And so I thought, you know, just thinking about Adam's comments, you know, I agree with a lot of what he said, you know, during his comments, but it comes down to this is going to be a really challenging decision because it's good news that doesn't feel like good news. We can all kind of liberalize. And I guess I just ask, you know, our neighbors to the south, you know, I mean, the metrics, we talked about the angler satisfaction and maybe we don't believe it, maybe we do believe it. It makes sense if you just look at the regulations. I mean, the 4-inch difference between, you know, states in the south and states in the north, and what's going on is really logical. The abundance is high in the north, and we're reacting in this negative manner. It's a negative feedback loop. The abundance is increasing, and we're trying to constrain catch, so we have to keep ratcheting down bigger minimum sizes to get out onto the tail of the size distribution, shrinking the season to get, you know, cut off the tails of when the fish are available. So, I mean, it's simple to understand what's going on, and we hope in the manner that Adam offered during his comments that we can work together collegially, try and get ourselves, it's still not going to be anywhere near comparable regulations, even with that. I know we're asking for a lot. I really hope folks can take a look and just sort of think about the discrepancy in our regulations, and it's the same fish, you know, that we're working on. They're not just gigantic in the north and much smaller. It's the same population. So that's it. I just, you know, begging and borrowing. We hope you can kind of see that and help us work to get some reasonable regulations up in the north.
All right, thank you. Other comments? You know, there's two motions on the board, but I think, you know, if board members can indicate their preference or their support for one or the other, I think it's important. We're, you know, these motions are trying to do them separately, I think may be really difficult. So if there are comments on either of these, please bring them forward now. Yes, John.
More of a question, Mr. Chair. So the 30% liberalization, if it went to the north, splitting the remainder between New Jersey and the south, how much would be remaining for the south in this case? You know, because it looked to us that for like 1% for us is only 0.5% for the north region. So like I said, just curious as to what the actual percentages would be.
I think Rachel can help out.
Yeah, so if it's 30 in the north and you split it evenly between New Jersey and the southern region at 12, it would be approximately 12.5% within a few percentages. So it could be anywhere from like 12 to 13, but probably in that 12.5 range.
Thanks.
All right, and then I had Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the substitute motion, and I just want to start out by saying that I appreciate the you know, collaboration that is expressed in the underlying original motion and the intent to follow the guidelines in Addendum 32, which this board unanimously approved back in 2019 or so. And that there is generally, I think, a recognition that a 20% per region approach, as was initially mentioned, would not be consistent with the addendum, and it would be an appealable decision in my eyes, and I'm sure that's something none of us want to deal with at this point. But, you know, in addition to everything that John and Jay have laid out, you know, I can't help but reflect on the graph that staff showed about the regional harvest trends. And what you see there in the northern region is an over 60% reduction in harvest in the last 4 years. That is not because the fish are less available in our region. It's brought about entirely by the regulations. If you looked at the releases, you would see stable increases, stable releases in the north. And unfortunately, what that has led to in the last 3 years is dead discards that are exceeding harvest in the northern region. We account for the majority of dead discards. And that's not just something that the northern region has to deal with. That is reducing the RHL by the expected discards on the coast. So we are all suffering from a lower RHL because of the releases and the dead discards that are occurring in the north based on the regulations. So moving, you know, this liberalization a little bit more strongly to the north would be a benefit to all of us in that sense. The other thing that I see in that graph and the harvest declining in the Northeast is that while the RHL did increase this year, and that's something that we should all be able to utilize to some degree, the main reason that we are in a liberalization position is because the northern region harvest has declined. That is it. So it makes sense to me that most of that liberalization, or a larger degree of it, would be shared to states in the north where the regulations are really putting us at an disequal standpoint. There was a couple other metrics that, you know, that the TC, all of them that they pointed out there had a consistent theme to them. There's some other things, like if you just look at the maximum retention that an angler could take in the north versus the south. You know, not that anyone's going to go fishing every single day and catch their bag limit, but it's 4 times greater in the south than in the north region, and it's 2 times greater in New Jersey than the north. So just trying to put some additional numbers on what we look at the paper, and to us is so evident as a disparity. There are more numbers that back it up. So I think that this would go a really long way to benefiting all of us in terms of reducing those releases. So I hope that sentiment of working together can come through in this motion. And, you know, regarding the underlying motion, I'm concerned about kind of that timeline and the process. I think we need to leave today as regions knowing what we have to work with. Massachusetts has already made a plan that if we would know what we were dealing with today, and we would have our commission meeting next week, and we did our scoping meetings earlier to prepare for this meeting. So we have planned for a decision today that would tell us what we have to work with. And I think that for the short timeline that we have, it's important that we stick to that and not approve the underlying motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Joe, did you have your hand up next?
Yeah, thank you. Wow, I appreciate it. I think one of the things that has bothered me for years is the notion that we haven't been able to liberalize in this fishery. I think that message has been poorly conveyed. We haven't been able to liberalize regulations, but we have increased the total allowable catch for this species for some time. And so, you know, I think there was excitement at the joint meeting that we were talking about a 20% liberalization. On another note, I had mentioned during executive committee that I have concerns on what is done through an addendum versus what is done through an amendment. You see, we have very little public in the room here. I think, you know, what we're looking at is de facto reallocation for targets. And I don't think that that's something that would be done so kind of willy-nilly in a quiet room like this. If you know, a state like New Jersey was understanding that they weren't able to go after what should be their target. So I have concerns with the motion on the board. I have concerns with, you know, how we're doing this. I think the biggest problem is in mismanagement of this is the timing is just absolutely so difficult. So even to the original motion, I don't think that New Jersey could meet the deadline that Tony mentioned. I think we might be a day late, Tony. I think we could get, but that's completely, I think, unfair, you know, for the northern region, and I don't see a good way around that. But I can't support the substitute because I think it is a bigger issue than what we're dealing with right now. I think, you know, I appreciate that the addendum that talked about this, that was fully supported by everybody, was, you know, I think that everyone had a different notion of what that means. One of the interesting things I think is people were saying, if we can't liberalize now, when? You know, if the stock's in incredible shape, when can we possibly liberalize regulations? The reality is when things are not so great, because as Jason mentioned, we are trying to constrain catch because we can't avoid these fish. In a few, you know, if this stock does go down, we will have a harder time catching them. And like bluefish in a rebuilding period, we're looking, you know, we're looking at liberalizations. Like fluke, that we all have concerns about the stock, we've looked at liberalizations. That's the reality of where regulations may be going in the future. But to me, this is too big of an issue to just kind of to throw out there like this. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Other comments on either motion? Yes, Mike Luisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm struggling with both motions in selecting one that I like. I feel as if the motion that that's currently before the board, the substitute, while it's been explained as to why it goes as far as it does, I would have a very difficult time leaving this meeting today, going home and telling our anglers who had they understood that by liberalizing by 20%, that they were going to have that opportunity to speak to the agency and have a discussion about what those measures look like. Now, I think we in the Southern region have a pretty decent handle on what our rules could potentially be at the outset of all of this. And so I'm having a difficult time with that conversation in my mind as a follow-up to today's discussion. To the underlying motion, I'm challenged with the idea that nobody would know what we're working with until we get home, which won't be till Thursday, Friday, and we have to turn around options by the 12th of February to ASMFC, which for me, there's not enough time there for me to even get home and organize a public hearing of any kind to get the feedback that we would be using as the justification for why I would support that motion, because if it built in enough time to have those conversations at home and then bring something back after coordinating and collaborating with my Southern region partners, I would most definitely be in support of option one. I don't know that it doesn't give me as an administrative manager in Maryland any real flexibility. And so I'm struggling with both. I don't think that I'm going to support the substitute. And if that were to fail, I've been thinking about a way that we might be able to even split the concept up a little bit more, make it a little simpler. So I guess I'm saying we're going to wait and see what happens, but I'm uncomfortable with both.
Thanks, Mike. Joe Grist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really want to support substitute, very much so, but I don't have enough data to go on what our options would look like with that substitute. And I've got staff now feeding me all the information they possibly can right now live, and they don't have the time to do it, to give me something during this meeting. And that's where I'm hung up with the substitute. I don't have the info I need to be able to support it as much as I want to, because I don't know what those options look like. All the options for the south will run at 12.5 inches. And there could be options at 13 inches I'd be perfectly happy with, but I don't have the data to do it. So with regret to my northern counterparts, I won't be able to support the substitute for the fact I just have a lack of information to make a sound decision. I'll agree with what Mike just said on the first motion. Overall, I see some really good things with Adam's motion, but I'm still trying to piece that one out a little bit further. But that's where I'm at with the substitute for lack of information.
All right, thanks, Joe. Rachel, can you shed any light on this?
So yes, I only have, and again, these are like placeholders, so I don't know that they're ideal for you, but we did look at 12.5 inches and then closing the season closure, so you would be open through the closure in the south, and that is 12.5, a little under 12.5%. What's that? I didn't look at 13 inches, I'm sorry.
Thank you, that's helpful. Going down the coast, Chris Savage.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I share pretty much all the same concerns as Joe regarding not having the information in front of us to know that if we get what a season expansion could look like if we get the size look the same in the southern region, which I support for some of the questions asked about, dropping the size limit too low and having unintended consequences. The underlying motion makes the most sense if we had more time. but we're kind of running out of time. I guess if forced to support a motion, it might be the one to substitute because we need a number to work with. We know the disparity in the regulations and from the northern region versus the southern region and New Jersey. When we kind of got to this point around 15 years ago or whenever, I can't remember the details of it, but the southern region more or less tried to mirror the federal regulations as most of the fishery occurs out in federal waters. It resulted in reductions that weren't as pronounced as what we saw in the northern region. In the interest of addressing these disparities and real concerns with the fishery and quite frankly, I think concerns with discards with these higher size limits. It's I think appropriate to come up with some reduction higher for the northern region, whether it's 30 or not, I don't know, but I think we got a number we need to start working with. So maybe 30% is it, and then we go with what's left in the southern region in New Jersey. Thanks.
Matt Gates, I knew somebody's over here.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm going to speak in support of the substitute motion. And a lot's already been said, so I'll kind of keep it brief. But the example that we put forward of the 15.5-inch minimum size in the northern region gets looks like a 30% liberalization, but it's not evenly distributed among all the states. State like Connecticut in that instance would receive about 11, almost 12% liberalization. So, anything less than this 30% liberalization for the northern area may leave a northern state like Connecticut with perhaps the smallest liberalization on the coast, which I think that kind of goes counter to the intent of the addendum that we're referencing, addendum 32. So, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to go to Adam, and then since some folks have said, we haven't had a lot of public comment. There's one hand online. There's not a lot of folks in the room, so I'm going to take very limited public comment before we get to a vote on either of these motions. But first, I want to go to Adam, and then we'll do one quick public comment.
Thanks very much. It probably won't come as a surprise to anyone that I'm going to oppose the motion to substitute. But just with regards to the timing of the first part, regardless of what we do, states have to provide proposals by February 18th. That's the TC deadline here. So even with the first option where we're talking about bumping that up to the 12th or the 13th, I would have to ask the states that are using as a justification to not support the original motion, considering there's a weekend between the 12th and the 18th, are 3 or 4 business days really going to make or break these runs? I think that's all I would put out there is, let's remember that we're faced with a hard date right now, no matter what path we choose, of the 18th. And we're talking about potentially bumping that back to the 12th or the 13th. And, ask yourself, is for doing the right thing here, is that potentially really going to save me and give me the extra time I need to do certain things at home? Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. With that, I've got Victor Hartley online. If you want to go ahead, Victor, for 3 minutes and check your mic, and I'll let you know if we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
You got it. Go ahead.
Okay. I agree with Adam on his motion. He's trying to help the other states, but Nicola made a comment that they're getting blamed for more dead discards. And I have said that for years, fighting for the people from New York North. Unless they bring their fish down even below 15.5, they're not going to get blamed for dead discards. They're just going to keep having dead discards. Also, one thing the northern states have that New Jersey and South don't have, and I know because I'm part of a business in New Hampshire, you have pollock, cusk, redfish, and hake. We don't have any of that. Our key fish is sea bass, flounder, bluefish, and striped bass. That's it. And the other problem, that angler satisfaction, none of our anglers this summer were very happy with one sea bass. I can tell you that for a fact. So there's no way that that thing is correct. But look at the other fish in the north that you have to fish for. And I feel for you up in the north, I do. But the problem is until you bring your size down even to 13 or 14 inches, you are not going to get rid of the dead discards. And I mean, there's no way I would support that other motion. Neither would any of my for hire counterparts. And thank you for letting me talk. If I would have known this was going to happen, I would have absolutely been down there. And it's not right that we don't know when things are going to happen like this, because you would have had a packed house down there today if we would have known this was going to happen. We just got a heads up, thank God. And thank you for allowing me to comment all the time.
Great. Thank you, Victor. Appreciate that. And one more comment in the room. Mike Wayne, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Wayne with the American Sport Fishing Association. I'm going to focus my comments strictly on process. You hear there's public listening in on the call. There's not a lot of people in the room. And I think it's important that we give the public an opportunity to really participate in what is a very new process that's going on with the states determining how to liberalize, especially considering that we haven't had a liberalization in this fishery in over a decade. Now, I'm not saying that there's some formal comment period that would be established, but I think the underlying motion provides more opportunity for the public to communicate to their commissioners about what they would like to see for this fishery and this liberalization. And so I know there's media listening in on the call today, and I believe that they can do what they can to inform the angling community that this is going on and that they need to be talking with their commissioners as this process goes forward. And I think the underlying motion gives the best opportunity to get that included. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think it's worthwhile agreeing that this timeline is tight, as Adam mentioned, Mike mentioned, others have mentioned. I think there's two backstops that we're working against, and Tony can correct me or our staff can correct me if I'm wrong. One is we need to notify the Northeast Garfo that what the state regulations are in black sea bass so they can implement rulemaking and extend those out into federal waters. So that's one of the deadlines. The other is the states need to know what the regulations are so they can implement those and have their, have them in effect for this year's fishery. So those are the unfortunate or realistic deadlines that we're up against. So, Tony, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's
I just want to make sure that everyone remembers how we talked about this at the Mid-Atlantic Council meeting when we approved the 20% reduction. And at that meeting, we stated the process that we would be going through to do this and noted at this meeting, we would have to decide how to divide that allocation because the addendum does not set up allocations and it is set up in a way that the states work towards intra and inter disparities within the regions that were caused by significant overages over a course of a decade, in the late 2000s. And so we did notify the public through the meeting, and then obviously in our agendas, it states what we're doing ahead of time.
All right, hang on, Nicola, one moment. There is one more public comment online, Paul Herzl. So go ahead, Paul, and then I'm gonna sort of check the temperature of the board and see where the board feels we should go. So go ahead, Paul, please.
Paul, just unmute yourself.
Paul, we can't hear you. Is he muted on his end, Tony?
Paul, you just had it. Hold on. Does he have two? No, his other one's, oh, okay. Paul, try hitting your microphone and unmuting yourself through the red microphone button, turn it green.
Well, Paul, we can't hear you. Keep trying to work out the microphone situation. I'm going to go sort of what I mentioned, would check the temperature of the board, then I'll come back to you.
Can you hear me now?
You got it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'm on my computer now. Yeah, it's Paul Hartel from the Jersey Coast Anglers Association. I'd like to say I sympathize with the states to our north. I understand the problem they have is with the large size limit and all. However, I think that giving them a 30% liberalization while New Jersey and the southern states only get 12.5 is unfair. I don't like it at all. The bigger problem is the stocks have been rebuilt to 284%, and we finally get a liberalization. We could have had more. I think the quota was increased 30%. We got a 20% increase or liberalization due to Adam's motion at the last meeting. So I was thankful for that. But now to have it cut down to 12.5 is really disgusting. It's aggravating, and I support Adam's motion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board? Would a break be appropriate now for a few minutes for folks to sort of talk and think about where they are before we vote on these motions? Would a break not be beneficial? What do folks think? A little break? All right, we're gonna go and have about a 6-minute break, 4:50, we're gonna start again. Everyone, we're past the 4:50 number, so let's come back in a couple minutes.
I'm ready, Bob.
You and I'll just chat, Joe. All right, everyone, please take your seats and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get back to it. Just as a reminder of where we are, we have a main motion and a motion to substitute. We're back from the break. Are there any comments on the two motions now? Or is the board ready to vote on the substitute motion? Not seeing any objections to that. Is there any, I know we've had a break, but is there any more time needed for state caucuses before we vote on the motion to substitute? All right, seeing no hands. So those in favor of the motion to substitute, please raise your right hand.
Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, North Carolina, and New Hampshire.
Thank you. Those in oppositions, like sign.
New Jersey, Virginia, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Maryland, Delaware.
Are there any abstentions? National Marine Fisheries Service abstains. Any null votes? Seeing none, the motion carries. 6 votes in favor, 5 votes in opposition, and 1 abstention. So that becomes our main motion now. Give staff a minute to pull that up, and we'll see if there's comments or if you're ready to vote. All right, thank you. So are there any comments on this motion now that it is the main motion? Yes, Mike Louisi.
Would it be appropriate for another substitute at this time, Bob?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take a stab at this. So I'd like to move to substitute to distribute the 20% coastwide liberalization among the regions as follows. Southern region, 16.5%. New Jersey as a region at 18, not to exceed 18%. And the northern region receiving the remaining liberalization from New Jersey and the southern region.
Thanks, Mike. We'll get that on the board. We'll make sure it says what you wanted to say, then I'll ask for a second. So give us a minute. Mr. Luisi, how does that look?
The intent's there. Yeah, it reads as I said it, I think.
Great, thank you. Is there a second to this motion to substitute? Roy Miller, thank you. Mike, do you want to provide some rationale for your motion?
Oh, yeah, sure, I would love to. I think where this falls, looking at the numbers and what will likely be the resulting measures that come from this. This is in between where we started when we had the underlying motion with Adam's main motion and then the one that was just approved. So this falls somewhere in between that. And I think that it sets up a kind of a stepwise approach based on the proportionality within the fishery. And so the way that I see this falling out is that the southern region, we're pretty close to knowing what it is that we would like to do. And I think we can accomplish most of what our public has already offered as suggestions to the liberalizations that we can make by using a 16.5%. That gives us some flexibility around size limits and seasons to produce something rather quickly. For New Jersey, they have had, struggles with discards and the low bag limits in their season. And so by providing New Jersey a little bit more, not to exceed that, gives them an opportunity also to factor in whatever's left over, would help out our colleagues to the north. And then as a northern region, starting at 20%, any addition that either New Jersey or the southern states were able to draw up to get us, to give them as much as possible to accomplish their needs, is the purpose of this. And I hope it's supported. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Roy, do you have anything as seconder to this motion to add?
Although there's not unanimous agreement over here, I see it as a compromise and something that gets us a fishery with a 12.5-inch size limit in the southern region and a longer season, say to May 1st opening, I think is a nice compromise, and it's not the best of that we could have hoped for with 20%, but in recognition of the problem that the North is in over management of this species, I'm willing to concede this amount of compromise and liberalization. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Yes, Nicola?
Questions first, if I may, before commenting. I'm wondering why I guess you said 18% was based on tiering, right? Do we know what this would leave for the northern region? Okay, thanks.
We are working on that.
Okay, but while you're doing that, I guess I would comment then on this that, what Mike has said about what this achieves for the southern region is that it achieves nearly everything they want. And I have to put that in the context of what I think the North could get out of this is a tiny fraction of what we would like to get to add to some more uniformity and reduce the disparity. Going to May 1, the beginning of May or April has not been open in the South since 2009. That's when we were all at the coastwide measures about that time period. So I don't feel like that is a appropriate benchmark to be trying to get to when no other region can get there. The other ideas about even opening April, I think, are complicated from the RDM perspective. They've commented that it's difficult for the model to just have a few days open within a wave. But so I'm a little concerned that this will only increase the disparity between the regions, and I'm just left not knowing what this really leaves for the North, but it's getting us further away from the guidance in Addendum 32. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicola. We'll get back to you with the answer to your original question, and when it's available, we'll keep taking comments until then. So, Bill Hyatt.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to speak against this motion. To me, looking through it, it really just seems like it's the motion that Adam had made earlier, it phrased differently. I think this is about where we would have ended up had that motion eventually prevailed. And as Matt mentioned earlier, when you couple that with the regional collaboration that's going to need to be done, I think for our state, Connecticut, it would leave us with just crumbs left. And so for that reason, can't support it.
Thank you. Other comments around the table while the math is still being worked on? Yes, Joe Semino.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I'll speak in favor of this. This is a stressful vote, and one of the things that I want to apologize for is that I did not thank the technical committee for all the work that they've done to date. I was really taken by how bad the discard rates are in this fishery. Something that John Clark mentioned is that, just having the lowest discard rate, but still being a very high discard rate is an issue. Allowing New Jersey, who has the most fishing power at this particular time, to have this liberalization, I think does address that to some extent. And so, I don't think that can be understated. I do hope that the, northern region can also get the, liberalization that helps them reduce discards. I think that's got to be the most important thing for this stock in the near future. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to go to Rachel to see if she has the response to Nicholas' question from a few minutes ago.
Yes, so it would probably be approximately 25 to 27% left over for the northern region, and that depends on, again, how all of the options interact with each other for that median value.
All set, Nicola, with that answer? Okay. No, okay, all set. Other comments on this motion to substitute, or are there any comments, or do the states? Yes, Adam.
I guess I owe my constituents an apology back home because I walked in here promising them that I wouldn't walk out of here with a yes vote for anything less than 20%. So I'm sorry. But that being said, hearing the conversation around the table, the will of the board, the spirit of the first motion was to collaboratively work together on something that we could all work towards as a common goal. And here we are. You've got a southern region that says we can walk away. And I understand that Nicola's suggesting they're getting everything they want. We know that's not true from their for hire operators suggesting a start into April. However, we also need to realize that they are the smallest percentage of the harvest on the coast. So the bang for the buck of them isn't there. It's just not doing things for everybody else. We've now got a motion that still gets the northern region the lion's share of the liberalization. They're gaining 5 to 7%. Everybody else is losing 2 to 4%. It reflects the proportions of what the perception is of how the fishery is. The northern extent of the fishery is deemed unbearable. The southern extent is deemed fair to good. New Jersey's stuck somewhere in the middle. Unless you're the RDM, then everything's rosy. This at least provides that proportional change and is a significant bump from where we were when we decided on a 20% liberalization. We're now saying, North, we hear you. We're giving you 25 plus. this seems to be that collaborative approach that I walked in here hoping for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Other comments at the table? And if not, there's one public comment or one hand up public comment online that I'll recognize. All right, seeing none at the table. Stephen M, because I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name, and I apologize for that. But Stephen M, if you can unmute yourself and make a comment, that'd be great.
I still support Adam's initial motion. The first substitute motion did exactly what Adam said, which was divide the states, pit one state against each other. This new substitute motion, with the information provided, seems to be a compromise, giving everybody almost everything they want, okay? But, you know, we still go back to that meeting in December, okay, where the monitoring committee gave options up to 40%, but instead most of the meeting was wasted, okay, talking about how the new method of analyzing the data, okay, affected the confidence index, and it was lost sight of the fact that CBS was at 284% of the quota. So here we are, talking about little pieces, okay, so this latest motion, I think, would be a compromise and satisfy, or should satisfy, almost everybody. That's it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. John Maniscalco, go ahead, please.
So addendum 32 asks the board to decrease intra-regional and interregional differences in measures for recreational black sea bass. So despite the rhetoric around the table, I kind of fail to see how this distribution of liberalization is going to achieve that when we know that there's a real desire for some pretty serious seasonal extensions to the south of us. There's 16.5 to 12.5 inch difference in size limits along the coast, even neighboring states, New York and New Jersey. So I'm wondering what tool the commission has to measure differences in measures, and if we can compare if we had any success after this liberalization. Thank you.
John, I'm not sure, you know, speaking from the chair position, yeah, the commission doesn't have a specified tool that evaluates differences between states and regions. So I think it's just looking at the measures and seeing if they're getting closer or further apart. This kind of the best we can do. Chris Batsavage.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess a question for the northern states, whether they can answer now or think about it when we caucus, is will a 25 to maybe up to 27% liberalization allow your states to kind of liberalize to the level that you need to? No one's going to get everything they want. We understand that. But is that enough to actually make some meaningful changes to your regulations compared to 30% what you talked about before? And I'm guessing that's probably, I don't know if that was the minimum amount or not. So I don't know if anyone can answer that now, but I'm just trying to figure out what might be a reasonable compromise among these different measures. Thanks.
Jason, is this a follow-up, or I had Dennis before you? Is that okay? Okay, if you want to respond to Chris's, and then I'll go to you, Dennis. Is that okay?
Yeah, so I think, Chris, I appreciate the question, and I'm actually surprised that about the amount that's coming to the north under this. I can't quite process that, to be honest with you. But the 30% it wasn't made up, right? I think the key thing that the northern states were looking at was the size limit. That's like one of the bag limits as well, but the size limits are really, like, that's a major discrepancy. And the 30%, it's like about a 4-inch difference. 30% gets one of those 4 inches. And that like takes that much, you know, and that's kind of the thing that we're challenged with, is even that modest adjustment just takes a lot to get done. And so, yeah, that's the challenge, why we're not being greedy. It was calculated that that's what we needed to even make that one adjustment to our regs. Also, just a tangent on the how do you measure the differences. I actually built a little tool that does that. I kicked it out to some of the technical committee members, but that might be worth a look by the wider technical committee. I won't get into the details now, but it measures and allows you to compare different sets of regulations and how close and far apart they are.
Great, thanks, Jason. And I probably should be surprised you built a tool to do that. So we appreciate that. Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to let you all know that New Hampshire's not sleeping over here on this end of the table. Doing this is like making sausage in the legislative process. The problem I have with this supposed compromise is that it determines that the South will go 16.5%, New Jersey go 18, and then New Hampshire, not New Hampshire, the northern region gets whatever's left over, sort of not a definite amount. I'd invert this motion to the northern region gets 27 or 28%, then the southern regions figure out what they're going to do with the remainder, you know, because chances are the northern region will probably get maybe less than 27, 25 or whatever. So for that reason, I'm having difficulty considering supporting this at this time.
Great. Yes, John.
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Chair, knowing that the 30% passed already, I would support this. I think it is a good compromise. Nobody ever gets everything they want. I'm just surprised liberalization has turned out to be as contentious as reduction, but you know, I understand clearly the problems that the North has put forward. I certainly get that. And I just really wish we had had time to go out to the public first, because I think we could have had much better feedback if we'd been able to talk to our fishing public before coming here to make this decision. But given where we are, I'd support this as a compromise.
Great, thanks, John. Others around the table, Nicola?
I guess it's a question, really. You know, I think Dennis raised a really good point that we are making back of the envelope calculations right now as to what this leaves for the North. And, you know, if I knew it was 27, then I think I think I could agree that this is compromise. But I don't know that for sure. And I don't think we can even answer that for sure, because you have to run all the regulations together to do that. So let's say this passes and we come back to our March meeting to approve a range of proposals. And at that time, we know that based on what the South and New Jersey have selected, it's only a 23% increase for the North, which is what I was getting by my back of the envelope calculation. You know, what do we do then? Is there room at that time to adjust anything?
It's up to the board, really. I mean, I think the way it's worded now, the motion, or, you know, the liberalizations for the southern region and New Jersey are set. And then, you know, I think the liberalization for, you know, the northern region is somewhat uncertain. And I surely don't want to put any more pressure on folks trying to crunch numbers in front of the room, because that's really hard to do. And, but so there is a bit of uncertainty here, but, you know, I'm not sure what the recourse would be if the back of the envelope estimates are significantly off. That's kind of up to the board. Yes, Adam.
Ultimately, our decision at the March board meeting needs to put forth a set of measures that are deemed to calculate a total reduction coast-wide of 20%. increase, allow up to a 20% liberalization. So my sense of what happens is, with the schedule that got put up there earlier, sometime between the 18th of February and the 26th of February, these numbers, the proposed measures, will be fed into the RDM. We will get an idea of whether or not the coastwide liberalization is not exceeded. If it is, I think there's going to be all kinds of red lights and sirens going off, and TC members yelling and saying, hey, we got to go back and do something, at which point we would need to come back and not approve those proposed measures that were brought forth by the 18th. So I think what I'm saying is the backstop here is the board meeting when we cannot exceed a 20% coastwide liberalization. And if by the 18th and the 19th, we deem the proposed measures that have been submitted haven't been, we still have time to take corrective action to make sure the total coastwide liberalization is not exceeded. That's our backstop, I believe. And I'm sorry if I'm doing Tony's job here for her.
No, that's a fair comment, Adam. Thank you. So with that, any other comments? Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's still not clear to me when the North will actually have a number to work with. Like, yeah, so like a number certain. When do we know what we have to work with? Because we probably have the hardest decisions to make.
I guess so. It turns the question back around on the southern region in New Jersey. When do you both feel you can have your a set of measures that we can calculate your reduction, then back out the northern region's liberalization? I keep saying it wrong. It's a habit. So when does the South think they can work it out? For the southern region, when do you think you can work that out? Yes, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as John just mentioned, the option under 16.5 inches, there's one that's in the memo that would be one of the options that we would be looking at. It also has been raised today that there may be a consideration to maintaining the minimum size, leaving it at 13 and doing the early season portion as a separate piece to that, the April fishing. That's a conversation that the states in our region need to have. I think we can probably get that very quickly back to the commission. So for us, there's already one built, there's already one established. We could pick that or have a couple days. I think we'd have enough information to provide feedback to the commission.
Great, thanks, Mike. At the very beginning of your comment, you said 16.5 inches. I think you meant 16.5%. I don't want people to expect the southern regions going to 16.5 inches.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It's just late.
Yeah, no, I get it. I just want to make sure.
We've been having a conversation about 12.5 versus 13 inches as a minimum. So
yeah, fair enough. All right, and Joe Smino.
Yeah, thanks for putting us on the spot there, Bob. But I guess on that earlier motion, Tony had mentioned a deadline of 12/12. We're meeting with our advisors on 12/12, I think, or 2/12. Sorry. Thank you, everyone. So I would expect that by 2/13 we could provide that.
Is that helpful, John?
Can I say no?
Maybe it's the best you're going to get, I guess, is maybe the other way to look at it. All right. Is there any other, I guess, will more discussion change anyone's mind, or the state's ready to caucus on this motion to substitute? All right. Do the states need time to caucus? Yes. All right. 3-minute caucus. That's our caucus timer. Do you guys need more time? All right. All right. Looks like everybody's heading back to their seats. So let's get back together and are we ready to vote on this motion to substitute? Looks like we are. Looks like you all are. So with that, states in favor of the motion to substitute, please raise your right hand. Or jurisdictions, I should say.
Delaware, Maryland, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Virginia, North Carolina, New Jersey.
Thank you. Those in opposition, like sign.
New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York.
Abstentions. National Marine Fisheries Service, thank you. So the motion carries by my count, 6 in favor, 5 in opposition, and 1 abstention. So that brings us back to the main motion, which is the 30% liberalization motion that was talked about a couple times today. Is there? I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. That now we have this motion that was just passed. So that's the main motion now. Is there any need to caucus or anything else on this motion? Bill Hyatt.
Thank you. I'd like to offer a substitute.
Go ahead.
Substitute would carry the same language as up there, with the exception that the North would get 27%, Southern region would get 16.5%, and New Jersey would get the remainder.
All right, we're going to work on that. Let's get that up there, then we'll see if there's a second to that. And just so everyone knows that I've had a request for, call it a biological break. So, because I know everybody's caucusing and not many folks left the room. So if we get a motion on the board and a second, I'm going to take a very quick break, and then we'll come back and deal with the motion that's the new motion to substitute, if that gets a second. All right, the motion to substitute is on the board. Bill, is that what you had in mind? All right.
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you. Is there a second to this? Nicola Meserve. And with that, we'll leave that motion kind of sit for a moment, and while everybody takes a quick 3-minute break, hopefully. All right, if everyone can come back to their seats, we'll go ahead and restart again. Bill, do you have any comments or additional justification on your motion to substitute?
Sure. I'm not going to talk long. There's been a lot of talk already, but basically, I think this one captures a lot of the discussion that we've had over the last hour or so. Basically, getting the northern region 27% is well short of what it needs for what we see as meaningful change, but it's a point in the right direction, and it's kind of consistent with some of the discussion that happened over the last substitute, where people were looking for ultimately to get close to 27% to the north. The 16.5% gets the southern region a number that they're comfortable with. And the remainder going to New Jersey, it puts them in a position of being able to address the timeline concerns. They only have to negotiate with themselves. So I think it addresses some of the major concerns that have been voiced here today to the best compromise possible. And I think it still remains in the spirit of what Adam had originally suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicola, do you have anything to add as the seconder?
No, I think Bill covered it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yes, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I realized you didn't ask, moving this on to discussion. So this is obviously a terrible way do business, what we're dealing with right now. But I think one of the last points that Bill made is really important, and that's that it is easier for us as a single state / region to kind of understand, what the remainder of this is. I don't think it's going to be that different than the underlying motion that just passed. And I think that, on paper, it's almost a scary process, right? The notion that New Jersey can fish 4 less days and the entire northern region could go down to 15.5 inches is silly. It's not really, there's no real equivalency there, but that's what's on paper. That's what both the commission, the council, and NOAA have to deal with. And I think it's really the best thing for the stock to help reduce discard. So as tough as this is, I do support the substitute. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Joe. Other comments around the table? Yeah, John, go ahead, please.
Just have a question. We had some dispute about the actual percentages, and I just know from talking to our statistician that this is probably pretty close to what the last one was. I'm just wondering what the discrepancy might be. How much would Jersey be looking at on the, the kind of the low end and the high end range of these?
Have we done that math, or are we able to do that at all, Rachel? And we realize we are putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't fully flesh that out.
I don't have exact percentages to offer, but I did the rough math of the amount of liberalization available in pounds and how that would split out based on these numbers. And it would be, New Jersey would, this is a very rough number. Do not take this as fact, but about 408,000 pounds would be left over for New Jersey.
All right, seeing other hands around the table. Yes, Adam, go ahead, please.
So 408,000 pounds. And now's one of those things where you've just got to talk your way through things to go ahead and waste time. In the document, you've got New Jersey's status quo current harvest under status quo measures was 2.45 million pounds. So your quick math, if I understand, is 408,000. So my mouth says that comes out to something in the 16% range. Does that at least sound where I'm seeing some nods of heads here? And I'm hearing a 15 to my right. So one way or the other, what I'm hearing, I'm getting nods. Basically what we're saying is that this will provide New Jersey less of a liberalization than the southern states. That's essentially what we're getting out of this.
Adam, folks up here are saying 16 to 18%, but again, these are all rough estimates. I don't know what to make of that. Well, go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, I wouldn't take the 400,000 number as like an exact fact. That's again just a very rough estimation. So I think estimates of more 16 to 18 would be more accurate.
So follow up for that. So what were to happen? We've had this entire conversation in these percentages. If we had just all been really happy with our regulations at 3:30 today and said, oh, look, a 20% liberalization, we're all going to get a 20% liberalization, and been done and off to dinner in 22 minutes. The states would have gone back, came up with a proposed suite of measures which would have been put into the RDM, which then might have said we achieve a 20% coastwide liberalization, but could possibly have said those suites of measures exceeded the 20% liberalization, if I'm understanding the process, in which case we would have then had to run and scurry and figure something else out. And again, I'm seeing heads kind of nod to that. But here's my point. Here's my question. You just threw out a poundage. What would happen if instead of throwing all these percent numbers around, what if we converted this 2 pounds today? We know that we have a recreational coastwide harvest target of 7 million pounds, 7,033,000 pounds. What if we converted these targets to all pounds today instead of these percent liberalizations? Would that address our problem? Would that ensure that we constrain ourselves when the RDM chews on all this?
Tony, you want to comment on that?
I think that your first question about if everybody did 20%, would we come back and be scrambling? It is possible we would come back and be scrambling if every single region used their 20% to the utmost fullest when all of those measures interacted, when we ran them in the RDM. There is a possibility that it would have said it was 21% or something like that. But we hope not. And this is why the RDM is working differently than it did before. And we have to run everybody's measures together to figure out what that coastwide is. We didn't used to have to do that, but the tool changed. So we are in this situation. But the RDM does not work on pounds. So we cannot do that. We can't give you those numbers. And we're just trying to give you all these rough pounds to give you an idea of where we are, but we can't give these exact values. And in the end, it still depends on how all of the measures interact with each other. And the reason why the TZ is suggesting a very small number of options is because of that look that they are going to have to go back and review every piece of the interactions to make sure that it's correct and it's a viable option. And so that is where we are at this point. It's a lot. And so, like, we encourage you all, as you bring your options back, to do the smallest number possible.
See where it goes. Okay. All right. Yes, Dennis, I'm sorry, you had your hand up a moment ago.
I know, figures don't lie, and I know that Adam doesn't lie, for sure, seriously. But the problem with the main motion that's up there now, is that the feeling amongst the northern states is, to use an expression, we were being asked to buy a pig in a poke. We turned in selling the main motion that was up there, the motion before us, was that the northern states would probably get 27%. The substitute motion gives us the 27%, and it puts some, not uncertainty, but I would assume by the same rationale that New Jersey should end up with 18% if you swap the figures around. So I really think this is just simply locks in what the northern region, not what they want, but what they're willing to compromise at, and that is at the 27%, which I think allows them to change regulations that are more favorable to their states. Is that not true? Thank you.
Adam, go ahead.
I'm hungry. I'm sure I'm not the only one. We have the second bullet in this. What I'm hearing Dennis say is that the main motion set forth 2 numbers in the first bullet points, and there was probably a third number in the third bullet point. if we were to change either of those motions, if we had gone back and said the main motion, the third bullet, was going to replace with the northern region is not to exceed 27%, or we changed this substitute motion to have the last bullet to say the New Jersey region is not to exceed 18%. Does that then give something direction for everybody to go home, work on measures? And if we find out that the RDM doesn't give us that coast-wide liberalization as 20% or lower, that then because we have the exceedance language in New Jersey and the northern region, those two regions could go back and work on modifying things a little bit? Is that a potential way out here?
I'm not sure if that's a direct question to me or whoever, but you know, clearly it may be a way out, and you know, it may require some tweaking at the end of the process for you know, New Jersey and the northern region, but you know, we'd have to do that on the fly. But we're kind of doing this on the fly, so you know, it may be a way out. Yes. So what if, you know, we have a motion to substitute. What were you gonna say, Adam? Go ahead.
I'll just say that it will be my intention then. I think you would prefer to let this motion be voted on, and then I would recommend whether this gets voted up or down, whatever the remaining motion is, I'm going to make a motion to amend that third bullet point to put a not to exceed either an 18% if this motion passes, or if this motion doesn't pass and we come back, I'm going to throw it up on the top one. If you'd rather me make an amendment to the substitute, I will. I'll defer to where you want to go with that. But at this point, I think that's the way out of here. That allows every state to go home, work on a very specific target to come up with a suite of measures, and then allow the RDM to crunch that. And then if we need to tweak it, we've got the not to exceed portion language.
Great, thank you for that. Clarifying your intention and where you may go here. And thank you for agreeing not to go 3 layers deep, because that gets complicated. I think there are 2 public comments online. I'm going to take those and we're going to vote on this motion to substitute, and then we'll see where we go from there. So the first public comment is Robert Henn. Go ahead, Robert. Yeah, 2 minutes, please. Robert, I think you're self-muted, so if you unmute yourself, you should be ready to go. Yeah, it looks like your microphone is on, but we still can't hear you. All right, we're gonna move on to the second commenter. Victor Hartley, you already have one crack at this, so please be very efficient if you can.
I will. I don't feel that it's right that anyone walks out of this meeting without knowing what a percentage is. But on the other hand, what's the difference if you come back in March and we're liberalized, it comes back at 21%. The sea bass are so abundant, you guys can't take a vote in March that says we're going to liberalize this to make everyone happy in March, and we're going to go with 21%. What would happen if you come back in March and you're at 18% and we didn't use the remaining 2%? You mean to tell me in March you can't say, you know what, all the states came back, it came in at 21%. We're going to vote here today to allow 21% liberalization. You can always take away, but you can't give at some point even 1 or 2%, and then everybody gets what they want. It's not right that anybody leaves this meeting not knowing what their percentage is. You're trying to work with the northern states, but it doesn't seem like they want to budge, and now New Jersey is going to walk out of a meeting not knowing what they're getting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vic. And I'll try one more time. Robert Henn, can you make a comment? Okay, yeah, we unfortunately can't hear you. So let's go back to the board. And is there need to caucus on the motion to substitute, where folks decided what they're going to do? I see head shaking no for the need to caucus. So with that, those in favor of the motion to substitute, please raise your hand.
Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, North Carolina, Virginia, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Virginia, Delaware, sorry, I meant Maryland, and New Hampshire. Sorry, Mike.
Those in opposition, please raise your hand. Abstentions? National Marine Fisheries Service. And any null votes? New Jersey is a null vote. So 10 in favor and 1 null vote and 1 abstention. Motion carries. So that becomes our main motion. And I think we'll go back to Adam because he clearly stated his intention. So go ahead, Adam.
Yep, thank you very much. So again, trying to get to a point where we've collaborated, we've come up with a suite of numbers that this board seems to agree is a reasonable target. We know that the RDM is ultimately going to tell us whether the coast-wide liberalization or not is sufficient. So I would ask that I move to amend the last bullet to read New Jersey region not to exceed 18%.
Great, thank you. I think that's pretty straightforward. But John, you're willing to second that? All right, we have a second from John Clark. Thank you. Any comments? Yes, Matt Gates.
I just want to make sure I understand what we're doing here. This is in the event that come March, we need to fiddle with the numbers a little bit, right? That's right. So in that case, I would ask maybe that same language should just be for all of the regions so that we're all, when it comes down to wiggling the numbers at the end, we're all involved in that.
Great, thanks. So there is a motion. It has a second.
Would you accept that as a friendly?
It's late in the day. Let's get creative. Well, Adam, will you accept that as a friendly
I'd like
amendment?
to withdraw the motion and like the opportunity to make a revised motion to substitute that will do what Matt does.
Is there any objection to withdrawing the motion that's on the board by any member of the board? Dennis? your
Point of
objection?
order. There's a motion that's been seconded that has to be dealt with. You don't, Adam, you don't own that motion anymore. It belongs to the board. We do have to act on that.
Right, that's
You can
why
vote
I'm
it up or
asking.
down, but
I appreciate Mr. Beal's comments here regarding getting consent from the board, which is what I believe Robert's rules would allow to then withdraw the motion. You are correct. It requires consent of the board.
you know,
Thank
Adam, like you, I'm getting hungry too.
Right, so is there any objection to withdrawing the motion that's on the board by the folks around the table? Seeing no objection, you object to withdrawing that motion? All right, so we could, let's vote on this motion and then we may have a second motion to amend. So any need for caucus on where we are here? What's that? 1 minute. Yes, Tony, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that the public understands that these combinations of percentages may or may not exceed, in the end, when the options all come together, may or may not exceed the coast-wide 20%. And if that comes to it, we will be asking all of the states to tweak their measures to get us back to the 20% coast-wide.
Mr. Reed.
Yeah, to Ms. Kern's point, so does that mean that the language that says to not exceed is null and void at that point, or is it still in play?
The states can always take less of a liberalization than this motion is allowing. Is that,
So what happens if we can take more? That's the point.
Yeah, right. I think that we can come back to you all and say, the combination of options that you have told us, you're going to give us, I hope you're going to give us 2 options per region. That is I'm going to say that out loud. I hope it's 1, but we're going to tell you which of the combinations work for the 20% and which of the combinations do not work. If they are all under, we will tell you they are under by this amount, and you guys can decide if you want to tweak a little to get you there to the full 20%, if that's what you're seeking to do. But if they are over the 20%, we will come to you and say, none of these options that you have provided us in combination work to the 20%. So we'll come to you both ways, Eric.
Okay, so the exact.
Is minimal.
Mike. Sorry. All right, Tony, I think you gave me the answer that I wanted to hear, which means we're not constrained to it. We may be able to exceed if we have room for it.
Correct.
Sorry, just say yes.
But you will get very minimal number of hours to do that.
All right, are we ready to vote on the motion to amend? Looks like we are. Those in favor of the motion to amend, please raise your hand.
New Hampshire, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey,
Those in opposition?
Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, North Carolina, Virginia, Potomac River Fisheries Commission.
Abstentions? National Marine Fisheries Service. My count is 4 votes in favor and 6 in opposition. The motion to amend does not carry. You got 7? Okay, I was writing too fast then. So 7 in opposition, 4 in favor. Still, same result, does not carry. So that brings us to the main motion as originally drafted. Any additional thoughts or comments? Or are we ready to vote on the main motion? I see no hands. Is there a need for a caucus? I see no hands and heads shaking yes. So let's jump right in. Main motion. Those in favor of the motion on the board, please raise your right hand.
New Hampshire, Delaware, Maryland, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Virginia, North Carolina, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island.
Those in opposition? Seeing none. Abstentions? National Marine Fisheries Service, thank you. Null votes? New Jersey, thank you. That motion carries 10 in favor with 1 abstention and 1 null vote. All right, I think that is all that is in front of the board. Since, as Mr. Maniscalco mentioned, we're going to postpone the election of vice chair to the next meeting. Is there anything under? One more thing.
I just want to make sure, in case it was forgotten with everything else going on, that we have those 2 other small items of the proposed methodology. I think we've sort of talked about the workflow, but I just want to make sure there aren't any comments or concerns with those, or if they can move forward by consent.
Any concerns with those methodology descriptions that were provided earlier in the meeting and the timing of everything? Other than the timing is too tight, but that's the hand we're dealt. All right, not seeing any. Those stand approved. Anything under other business for the Summer Flounder Scup Black Sea Bass Management Board? Not seeing any. John is the actual chair. Do you have anything else you need to add? Are you ready to adjourn?
I think we're all ready to adjourn.
I think so. All right, board stands adjourned. Thank you all.